Here's the clip, and Josh Norman, Adrian Peterson, and Zionist warriors for, I don't know, you can make up your own mind, and we'll react on the backside.
Washington Redskins running back Adrian Peterson and cornerback Josh Norman, who just reportedly signed with the Buffalo Bills, are now returning from Israel after a very unique experience. The pair, who played together for 2 years, first arrived in Israel as participants in the International First Robotics Competition, and in partnership with RoboActive 2069, an Israeli high school organization. But after the competition, they also participated in training exercises with the IDF, running obstacle courses with soldiers, taking lessons in Krav Maga, and even receiving military briefs on the threats against Israel. So how was it? Well, Norman says that it's amazing to get in there and train with the IDF because they're at the top of their game of being in combat, and Peterson is amazed by the soldiers' mental toughness and focus. As for the exercise that stood out the most, the players say running up a hill with 40-pound vests, which apparently feels like running in sand, tops the list. Now finally, while this was Peterson's first visit, Norman is no stranger to the Holy Land. He's visited 3 or 4 times already, wears a chai or life necklace, and is even considering moving here. And of course, both he and Peterson say they'd return to continue their philanthropy too.
All right, I want to bring in another video. If you didn't think Josh Norman was crazy enough, was enthusiastic enough for Zionism and wanting to move to Israel and wanting to, all his training with the IDF, bringing Adrian Peterson with him, don't worry, we have plenty more. Now he is official Israel tour guide, and here is him at Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, ready to take you on your Israel adventure. Enjoy.
Hey guys, in just a couple of hours, we've got a big surprise for you. Seven of the top 100 NFL players are coming to Israel for a week of fun. From the top of Israel to the bottom of Israel. So what's on tap? They've got a meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. Four-wheeling in Israel and floating on the saltiest sea in the world, the Dead Sea. You can't get any lower than this. The old city of Jerusalem, the Galil, good food, and of course, great wine, and much more. So who's coming? Josh Norman, cornerback, Washington Redskins.
All right, so we just got a double dose of Josh Norman, kind of giving us our nice Israeli propaganda slash, tour guide, travel concierge, sort of, all inclusive Israel from top to bottom, or is it Palestine? I don't know. Mike, what's your take on what we just watched there with Josh Norman and his wonderful sort of tourism ministry position it seems like he's now appointed to?
Yeah, it just feels like I just watched, someone get throat punched and then get down the stairs. It's absolute,
Yeah, we're kind of self-loathing here on this show.
Absolute travesty. I mean, this, I'm not sure who made this budget of this video, by the way, but it was like literally just him at an airport just talking about, I'm in Israel, I'm in occupied Palestine. But it kind of shows the insidious nature of the agenda of Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, who's a hardcore Zionist, who's led these delegations of NFL players and really using the NFL as a means to recruit a lot of high-profile African-American athletes into supporting the Israeli agenda in their lobby. And this is all while, there's reports that have been out for years of the NYPD actually has a branch in occupied Palestine in Israel. They train together, as well as police departments like the Minneapolis Police Department, who of course murdered George Floyd.
DC Metro Police. Yeah.
DC Metro Police, all these different police departments, even in Jacksonville, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office training with the IDF forces. So it's kind of like the same tactics that the Israelis use against the Palestinians, these brute, aggressive, tactics. There's no coincidence that these tactics are used here in the U.S. I mean, I'm sure the U.S. teaches them a thing or two about oppressing people and locking people up. And the fact that you have so many weapons of mass destruction on the streets, like certain tear gas canisters, certain things that in other countries are actually illegal, are actually used in Israel against the Palestinians. When I was in Ferguson, they tear gas people, and I got a little bit of tear gas. I went to a gas station down the street, talked to a Palestinian store owner, and he was like, use an onion. The tear gas they use here isn't shit compared to what they use in Palestine. So he saw the connection. I mean, these are the same weapons that they use on black protesters protesting against police shootings. They're using on Palestinians as well. And as well, these same private prison corporations like G4S, which locks up and incarcerates African Americans here in these private prisons and lobbies for laws that criminalize more black people. They're also the same prison companies that are locking up Palestinians and Palestinian youth in Israel and Palestine and oppressing them and passing and pushing for more grotesque laws there to further criminalize Palestinians. So the connection is there between the oppressors in both occupied Palestine and as well as in the United States.
Yeah, it's almost like they test out how far they can go on Palestinians, right? And then that's sort of like their little, like, you know, lab rat grunt. I hate to say that, it's like, as terrible as that sounds, that's how they view it, right? And then they bring this stuff, you know, back here, and it's sort of like, it's just just like, you know, Mike was saying, and you know, it feels like you're getting thrown down the stairs. It's like I always think nothing shocks me anymore, and then something does, right? And something's just crazy. I mean, Josh Norman went to Vanderbilt University. He's not stupid. Is it just as simple as him being like cynically like bought off, kind of like Amari Stoudemire is in the NBA, or is it, or some people, is it the religious aspect that people get hooked on, you know, sort of like the Christian Zionism? I mean, what do you think someone like Josh Norman, who's not like, there's other guys, you know, we could point to down at Jocks that I would be like, oh, the guy's not very, you know, just not very smart, but like Josh Norman's not in that category. So like, I mean, I know we can't get inside his head, but like, either of y'all can hop in. Where does this come from?
Well, Amari Stoudemire was kind of getting into the religious dimension, because you have the Black Hebrews who are near Dimona in Israel, who are Black Americans who basically are denied, for the most part, citizenship, and are doing everything they can to collaborate with the state in order to justify their existence near Jerusalem, which is part of their kind of religious messianism. And so they got stuck by the nuclear plant, the secret nuclear plant in Israel, which isn't inspected by the IAEA. They all eat kelp to try to offset the effects of radiation. And Amari Stoudemire got in with them. It's like when Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown went to visit Israel, and they all went and met with them. And it was one of the weirdest trips ever. Then Ariel Sharon demanded a meeting with them, but Whitney and Bobby refused to shake his hand. It's pretty funny video. But Amari Stoudemire also was trying, I mean, it was kind of smart on his part from a career standpoint. He was fading in the NBA. His defense was fucking garbage.
Maybe the worst defensive, like, big man. I mean, I don't know.
The worst defensive. I mean, he was just he was like Jello in the paint. And in Israel, they have a very vibrant basketball culture. They're pretty good. Yeah. You know, it produced the Cleveland's assistant coach to LeBron. What was that?
Well, I mean, he was their head coach, David Blatt.
No, I'm joking. I'm just.
Oh yeah, you're right.
He was like LeBron's water boy. But exactly. Anyway, yeah. You know, so Amari Stoudemire gets into he finds a second life in his career. The same with the rapper Shine, who, you know, after he took the fall for P. Diddy and went to jail for a while, he comes back as an Orthodox Jew, like an ultra Orthodox Jew. And he's got, you know, the payas and everything. And he's like wearing the whole garb. And he became a star in the ultra Orthodox community, when before he was like a third or fourth rate rapper whose career had basically been decimated in prison because Diddy's lawyers just did him in. So now you have Josh Norman, who, as you said, he's not a stupid guy. He's smart enough to see the opportunity. And in the NFL, I mean, getting in with Israel, it's kind of like a form of class collaboration in the plantation system, because who is the master in the NFL? I mean, I'm Jewish, so I just don't feel afraid to say it, but a disproportionate number of the owners are Jewish, starting right here at the Washington team, Daniel Snyder, who is like donated $1 million to Trump. But these guys like to see.
Stephen Ross, the Miami Dolphins, is like a New York City, just I think either slumlord or just terrible.
He gets his money from angle drilling in Palestinian territories for water.
Oh, Ross does?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I didn't even know that, but I think, you know, it comes from a careerist perspective. And then there's just the other added dimension of getting free trips and free stuff in an exotic, faraway place. Just like every incoming freshman member of Congress gets a free trip to Israel. And it's like you were selling like lawnmowers in Texas and pool equipment or something. And then you get a seat in some safe Republican district. And the next thing you know, you and your whole family get a free trip to Jerusalem. And like, man, I swam in the Sea of Galilee.
Well, who doesn't want to get wined and dined? And the thing is, like, oppressed people don't have the financial resources like imperialist countries to use that leverage to really push people and recruit.
Yeah, no doubt. And so I mean, there's so many things. I mean, with this, it's hard to even. I want to get into the Bob Kraft stuff next. I mean, but in terms of all this stuff with like Josh Norman. The whole list of players like Adrian Peterson, these guys, there is a class collaborationist dimension to it. There's no doubt about it. It's just, it's also, there's a religious aspect that, the church and the Black community, especially in rural settings in the South, is a big deal. It's kind of like why a guy like Dabo Swinney at Clemson, who's a huge evangelical, is able to appeal to like a lot of like Black mothers that, the church is a big part of their life and Christian faith. And it's sort of like what Zionism's decided. And it's like why we see the ridiculous, like on the surface, seemingly relationships with like anti-Semitic Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and other anti-Semitic Eastern European leaders that are openly pro-Israel. Nonetheless, they are denied. They want to like basically hold up people that were Nazi collaborators and as national heroes. We see this in the Ukraine during the Maidan Revolution. So the contradictions are crazy. So with regards to like Norman and the video we're going to get ready to see right here is like a different one, but it comes from the Trinity Broadcasting Network, and it shows a real messianic trip where like, a lot of NFL players, mostly Black players, being baptized in the River Jordan. And you see just how powerful those stories are. I mean, especially the story of slavery in the U.S. context, and when you look at Exodus and the idea of being led out of slavery into freedom, and the analogies you see that are made, and then how terrible our education system is in our media. And I think that combining what I just said with what Max and Mike just said, we sort of see how this stuff comes to pass. So we're going to check out a video real quick from the Trinity Broadcasting Network showing a real messianic example of what we're talking about, and then we'll pick it up on the backside.
And welcome back to The Watchman from Washington, D.C. NFL football players are very tough guys, but take them on a tour of the Holy Land and you'll see an entirely different side of these iron men. Kufai's Israel Collective did just that recently, taking a group of current and former NFL players to Israel, where they were able to get in touch with the roots of their faith, walk where Jesus walked, and have a life-changing experience. Take a look.
Getting the chance to go and be baptized in the Jordan River, like I sent that picture like straight to my mom, like, Mom, you got to see this. So, my mom was there when I was baptized as a kid. And to be able to send her that and show her that, and remember listening to my granddaddy singing about the Jordan River, all these songs and these places that get talked about in church, and to be at a place like that where you've sung about it, and to be in it and actually get baptized there was phenomenal.
The Bible says what the enemy meant for bad, God would turn around for good. And the Jewish people going through such a horrific time in their history. And now, coming on the back end, they're so much stronger because of it.
What I'm going to be taking home back to my family and friends is that when I was in the Jewish home here in Jerusalem during Shabbat, it was an amazing experience to see how they came together with the traditions and the richness of family and love for one another, and being able to rest and let go of the week that came before them. I believe that the Sabbath is incredibly important for my personal walk, and to see that in an example like that was a great testimony for them and from their family.
I don't remember any point in this trip that people looked at us like they're outsiders, like what are they doing here? It was so inclusive. People will look at you and it's almost like they're looking in your soul. It's just like, I love you for you, brother. Like, how are you? Like, let's take a picture. Like, and that's before they even know we're athletes.
All right, Max. So what was your take after seeing whatever that was, messianic insanity there?
Well, it's all right there, right?
It is. It's sort of self-explanatory. I mean, but
well, I guess just some context. This is a show that's sponsored by Christians United for Israel, which was spun out of the main Israel lobby group AIPAC to cater to Christian Zionist evangelicals in the heartland. And so it appears that Christians United, I mean, they're run by this guy, Pastor John Hagee from the Cornerstone Church in San Antonio. He's someone who, I mean, he's a charismatic Pentecostal, and his preaching is pretty off the wall. If you just watch any random clip from him,
I'll recommend checking out Max's video he did. I think when you were researching for Republican Camorra, and
yeah, just go on YouTube.
It's one of the most insane things I've ever seen.
Yeah, just go on YouTube and watch Rapture Ready, my video on going to their annual summit in Washington. And I would go up and ask their members, you know, are you looking forward to Armageddon? They would say, I'm looking forward to Armageddon and the cleansing of the earth, just one after another. You know, they believe that the Jews have to basically be pushed out of wherever they live in the diaspora and gather in Jerusalem in order for biblical revelation to be fulfilled and for the Messiah to return. And this will be prefaced by several dispensations like a war of Gog and Magog, which they see as the U.S. and Israel fighting Russia, China, and Iran. I mean, it's just it's like Las Vegas, like ridiculous John Birch Society combined with you know, biblical revelation, eschatology. It's like the cheapest version of evangelical Christianity on the market. And, you know, it caters to a lot of these players. Like there's the baptism in the Sea of Galilee or in the Jordan River. Yeah. But there's also the political dimension for a lot of the, you know, and a lot of the white players in the NFL are Republicans. They're right wing. They're like pro-military. So you have, you know, how do y'all do it? How do you Jews survive with all of these threats on your
barbarians on your borders there, just thirsting to take you out, right? I mean, I don't know. I just have to jump in because not to get too conspiratorial, but I mean, if you were a hardcore anti-Semite, if you're David Duke, if you're like these people that, you know, ironically, let's not forget, like anti-Semites like Richard Spencer like the idea of Zionism because they like ethno-states. They like the idea of like, if you're a white nationalist, sure, like let the Jews go somewhere else, right? And it's sort of creepy when you're thinking of it in this like eschatology type of way. The idea of people that are like John Hagee, who's a known anti-Semite, and these other known anti-Semites who profess love for Israel, telling the Jews to go to all one place as if like, oh, if they were, it's almost like they wanted it to be a perfect recipe to annihilate him or something.
Well, I mean, it's just really quickly. I mean, Hagee has said that the Antichrist, well, first of all, he said that Hitler was a hunter and that he was part of this biblical revelation that will bring the Jews to Israel, that Hitler basically helped fulfill biblical prophecy. And so Hitler was kind of a biblical figure, and the Holocaust needed to happen in his view. Why is that less controversial than what a black NFL player says on Facebook sharing some ridiculous anti-Semitic meme?
Right. Who honestly, it's like an Instagram story that he just reshares quickly. It's not okay, but let's look at power dynamics. I think Max and Mike mentioned it earlier. I mean, who is in a position to actually have the power to do things? It's people like Donald Trump. It's Bibi Netanyahu. It's people that like this, that run organizations that sponsor, that send out this guy Mosberg, who's you know, Holocaust survivor, and you know, that's not my obviously what he's been through is horrible, but like they're rolling people out and they're cynically exploiting the Holocaust and Jewish suffering, and in a way that's purely about you know, the building public consensus and opinion around the idea that Israel has to, you know, we see annex the West Bank now. It's always the goalposts are getting further and further, and where's the end game now? And it's like now Deshaun Jackson becoming reformed is essentially him going to meet with this guy, you know, Mosberg, who in all honesty was indicted by Chris Christie here in New Jersey, became a multi-millionaire real estate guy, Christie's campaign didn't even want to rent commercial real estate space from him because of his like reputation in 2013. because so it just shows you that this guy is now, he's brought on shows. He's now considered the guy that Deshaun Jackson, a 33-year-old black guy from Compton, needs to talk to in order to, like, I guess, pay his penance, right, to society and get back in the good graces of Jeffrey Lurie, the Eagles owner, and Howie Roseman, their GM. And it's just a sad reality that instead of talking to Max, maybe you could mention some of the other great, like, American Jews who've done great things politically in art and culture and politics that he could meet with and learn a whole lot more and have it be a lot more meaningful. That's what really just upsets me about the whole thing. I just want to close on something positive, though. It's a 2017 piece, and it's basically about, like, NFL players, like, pull out of the propaganda tour that was sponsored by Kraft and was led by Michael Bennett first doing it after he read up on what it was and how he was essentially going to be exploited. And he really, and if you read his book, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable, along with, like, Dave Zirin, you'll really see kind of Bennett's transformation. He started this event, like, it really bothered him once he realized what he was about to take part in, if it weren't for, certain people kind of helping him learn what was going on. And a few things from the piece, you see that Michael Bennett, the letter he wrote, he said, "Dear world, I was shocked to make a visit. I was scheduled to make a visit to Israel with fellow NFL players. I was excited to see this remarkable and historic part of the world with my own eyes. I was not aware until reading this article about the trip and the times of Israel that my itinerary was being constructed by the Israeli government for the purposes of making me, in the words of a government official, a, quote, influencer and opinion former, who would then be an ambassador, quote, ambassador of goodwill. I will not be used in such a manner. When I do go to Israel, and I plan to go, it will be to see not only Israel, but also the West Bank and Gaza, so I can see how the Palestinians, who have called this land home for thousands of years, live their lives. One of my heroes has always been Muhammad Ali. I know that Ali always stood strongly with the Palestinian people, visiting refugee camps, going to rallies, and always willing to be a voice for the voiceless. I want to be a voice for the voiceless, and I cannot do that by going on this kind of trip to Israel. I know that this will anger some people and inspire others, but please know that I did this not for you, but to be in accord with my own values and my own conscience. Like 1968 Olympian John Carlos always says, there is no partial commitment to justice. You are either in or you're out. Well, I'm in. Sincerely, Michael Bennett, longtime NFL defensive end. So there's hope, along with Kenny Stills, the receiver from the Miami Dolphins at the time, who backed out of the trip too. NFL running back Justin Forsett also backed out of the trip, along with Michael Bennett, and Michael Bennett's brother Martellus Bennett, tight end, backed out of the trip. Kenny Stills was then traded from the Miami Dolphins after criticizing his owner for his relationship with Trump, while also in fundraising for Trump, while also claiming to support Black Lives Matter.
And that's all before the George Floyd protests, which have really, I think, given a lot of space to people within pro sports, but especially the most reactionary sport, the NFL, to express themselves. And so I think you're going to see players start to wonder why we have to care so much about this country 7,000 miles away when we can, like, actually talk about what's going on in the communities we come from. And the plantation system that we exist in, the sort of corporate plantation that's been set up in the NFL. You can already see the NBA kind of, it feels like a David Stern move or something, but they're really trying to co-opt the players. And so they're letting them wear officially corporate approved messages on the back of their shirts. And I mean, some of them are so bizarre, like education reform and group economics, which I guess is code for black capitalism.
Right.
But it's really, you can wear your little slogan, or, if you're a white ally, your jersey can say ally, but you can't choose anything that isn't corporate approved. But we're giving you this space to be a part of this protest movement. And we're hoping that it doesn't really go too far and start actually challenging the real power dynamics in the league, which speak to the whole capitalist system. Such as the guy over my shoulder there, Craig Hodges, who has literally lost his whole, livelihood as an NBA player because he was ahead of his time. Sadly, he didn't have any movement backing. And when he wanted to
boycott the game 1 of the 91 NBA Finals, Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan. Can you imagine the collective power there? I mean, he cites in his book a situation in the 1963 NBA All-Star Game. First time it was ever going to be on TV, televised nationally. And guys like Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, I think Bob Cousy was in there, and Oscar Robertson mainly. They, right before the game, decide they're not going to leave the locker room after they had warmed up. Right. So they leveraged their power at the right moment. And this is back before athletes made a lot of money. There wasn't all glamorous. They had to have all kinds of second jobs in the offseason. And that action right there, the owners met every one of their demands, for to have some retirement security. I forget all of them off the top of my head. But nonetheless, they leveraged their power in the right way. And it broke Hodges' heart that kind of power, multiracial power you saw there, they recognized what was capable. And yet in the early 90s, he was on a team, he basically admitted, in Jordan and Scottie Pippen, guys like Horace Grant, who knew next to nothing about their own history. And as a result, he got kind of tossed out. And that's just sort of what you see, I guess. And thankfully now we have more voices, and hopefully we'll be moving to a better space. But real quick, we didn't get in on Bob Kraft just specifically. I mean, he's really the guy who's like kind of engineered this whole dynamic of bringing Tom Brady over. Brady even had on his beanie on the sideline of a game a few years ago with an Israel flag and a U.S. flag together. He and Edelman, been this dynamic duo. They've had this relationship with Trump that's been very close.
The opening of the Kraft Family Sports Campus brought one more visitor to Israel, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell.
Hey, buddy. What's up, man? Man, I'm telling you, bro, this has been the best game changer time ever, bro. Everybody tells me the same thing. You can't get no better than this, man.
This is an emotional moment. For all my friends who don't speak Hebrew, I hope you'll give me a pass. אני זוכר הפעם הראשונה שהגעתי לישראל בשנה 63 לירח הדבש שלי, יכולתי להביט כל כך מקרוב אל עבר העיר העתיקה, אבל לא להגיע לתוכה ולא את הכותל המערבי. ואני ממשיך להודות לקדוש ברוך הוא על כך שאפשר לי ולמשפחתי יהונתן, דניאל ויהושע לעזור בבניית ירושלים, עיר הקדוש, כולנו יחד, כי אם אחד בעיר אחת ותפילה לשלום, עם ישראל חי.
All that remained before the long flight home was one last, supper.
I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody, but if you asked me, was I taking a vacation to go to the Middle East, I would have told you no. I mean, a black man coming to the Middle East on vacation is just not the thing I'm looking to do. Coming from the 9th Ward in New Orleans, Louisiana, to be in Israel. Unbelievable. And not just to be here, but to be here with some guys who I look up to. I grew up poor. I sold popcorn in the Superdome just to watch y'all play. Because that's the only way I could get in. So to be here and to be friends with y'all and to hear your stories and to have y'all listen to my stories is unbelievable. You know, I came here just a member of the hall, but man, I'm leaving with some special relationships.
The insanity of this and just how just normalized it is. I mean, Marshall Faulk actually comes on here, Hall of Fame running back, and talks about, when I first heard of a black man wanting to go on a trip to the Middle East, I wasn't in at first, but now that I've come and I see how great this is, I was wrong, and it's just like Kraft is just there with like an entourage of Hall of Famers, of Jim Brown, even Chris Carter, just Joe Montana. I mean, the Falk. I mean, all these current players, and they're just gushing over him. Like, you know, and this is a guy, let's not forget, who's used massive legal firepower to help basically suppress the evidence of him going in and out, and also being videotaped, receiving, you know, having basically, you know, going to a massage parlor for sex that was being investigated for international sex trafficking, human trafficking. And
well, you know, when it comes to improving the U.S.-Israeli special relationship or patronizing massage parlors, Bob Kraft can really pull it off.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, he's got it. I mean, evidently that
he's a really hands-on guy.
He's very hands-on, and he wants hands-on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he has a lot of tolerance for jerks.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, Bill Belichick, you know, is his buddy there, right? But I mean, he's really, what makes him especially evil, I feel like, is just he really is a good like communicator, and he makes people feel important and that they matter when they're speaking to him, and they have his undivided attention. And you see him, why he's been successful in that way, and the fact that it's so cynical. And we see that, and that he basically, right after the time when they had the damning evidence on him that his attorneys have been able to get suppressed through technicalities, he just hopped on his private jet and flew out to the AFC Championship game to watch his Patriots, you know, win and go on to another Super Bowl where they, you know, beat the Rams year before last. So, I mean, the level of wealth is just so beyond anything we can comprehend. But again, I don't. Despite that, there is hope. There's players like Kaepernick, what he did, in what is
there.
Really,
you know, there's an effort to co-opt him right now through, you know, Disney allowing him to have like a social justice show.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is there any way he can do that without being, you know, bought and sold out, or is it pretty much is that the kiss of death, you think?
I mean, we'll see what the show looks like, but it seems like once you enter the once the corporations start opening the door for you and you take it. I mean, he already took a big Nike deal,
right?
And you know, you want to displace the lost wealth from your career being destroyed because you took a stand. Mm-hmm. You know, he gets to have his cathartic moment on the show. But what kind of conception of social justice does Disney want to impart to people? I mean, how far is it going to go? I mean, I talked with Aaron Mate on his show Pushback, which, you know, it should be out by the time this is out, at the Grayzone, about the co-optation of the Black Lives Matter protests. I mean, before they were Black Lives Matter, it was Ferguson, and it was people rioting in Ferguson, people really directly confronting cops. And then these activists came in who were sort of professional activists. Right. They were from
DeRay McKesson.
Well, DeRay's the most extreme example, but I mean, right. I even pointed to blacklivesmatter.com, which is sort of the official NGO wing of the movement,
right,
which is very controlled and very connected to the Democratic Party. And it's just filling up with foundation cash right now. And if you look at their website, besides their gigantic merchandise section, it's they have this 2020 initiative, which is all about voting. And it's just like vote.
It's always the same, right? It's just, I mean, it's
sheepdogging for the Democrats. And
right.
Alicia Garza, who is one of the 5 founders, I think, or 3 founders, she was very vocally endorsing Elizabeth Warren. I mean, what kind of radical change or class struggle is that going to produce just because Elizabeth Warren has some wonky solutions? So this is, I mean, to me, it's like what Mike was talking about, where, you know, the historically Black college class presidents are groomed by the Israel lobby, not exactly knowing what they're getting into. And then all of a sudden, all these career opportunities and networking opportunities are presented, and you become a careerist. You start suppressing your own inclination to dissent in order to keep that going, because what's the alternative? It's not very good. And that's what the nonprofit industrial complex does within activist circles. And it's what corporations do within the already hyper-corporatized professional sports world with endorsements. I mean, everybody knows that you don't make most of your money on the field. You make it through endorsements. Right. So find your brand, make it a social justice brand, and then that can be lucrative as well. But it plays a role in getting you to limit how far you're going to go.
Right. The NFL has, like, what they do is my cause, my cleats. And for Julian Edelman last year, it was Israeli baseball. He's had other ones. It's like Israel and community. There's in one of the clips, like that I was watching, to get ready for this, one of a player who's a fringe guy. I don't even know if he's in the league anymore. I can't even think of his name. But nonetheless, he talked about going to Israel for the first time. And it was like the biggest thing that struck him, and Max, you could probably speak to this, is like the just how much they just the zealous like just love for Israel, the flags draped over your shoulders and everyone's dancing around, and it's like they're high on Zionism. And I know when you were like researching for Goliath, you talked about going and like seeing some of the birthright trips, and also just in certain crowds where people would gather, and you saw like the reaction David Sheen got and that Feeling to Hate in Tel Aviv thing he did, where he was basically assaulted, and it's like, it's because they feel like this community is so special, and it's like so worth protecting, that like whatever has to be done, whoever could be like not part of that is somehow the other, in like the most in a sense where it gets so crazy and next level that like you have what you have in Gaza with like people with like operating remote controlled machine guns just mowing people down, detached from life, who can also then just go out and probably just dance around and be high on Zionism too. But
I think the religious component is really central. Israel's left wing and liberals base of support in the U.S. is completely collapsing. The liberal Zionist gatekeeper of my generation, Peter Beinart, has pretty much given up on a two-state solution. I mean, he's not going to go towards BDS, and I'm sure he'll continue kind of limiting the space, but he's definitely showing where liberals or self-styled progressives are going on Israel. I mean, this is someone who comes from a much more religiously Jewish background than me. And, he's kind of done with the whole idea of an exclusivist Jewish state. And so many others of my generation, younger generation, they're done. So Israel's moving more towards religious Christians. Christian Zionism's becoming a priority. The Republican Party is the new future base of Israel. And then, I mean, of course, you have all these bought off Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, or like Chuck Schumer. He believes in it, and he's bought
Joe
off.
Biden.
Yeah,
really
Biden. I mean, whatever. In the right wing Democrats like Biden, but the future, in blue safe districts and urban settings, you're going to have like AOC types who are like not exactly pro-Israel.
Or Jamal Bowman, who won't even endorse BDS, I believe.
Yeah, they'll never endorse BDS. That's not now, but they're not exactly showing up at AIPAC and going on the free trips. Right. So, and they can't. They'll pay a price actually with their own constituents. So that's a new thing. So the point is, with Israel catering to that audience, that constituency, people believe you're in a Christian Protestant church, even if it isn't a right-wing Pentecostal charismatic church like the kind that John Hagee runs, you learn that Israel is covenant land, and that God made a covenant with the Jews that this would be their land. That's just sort of foundational to the mainstream Christian faith in the United States. So these proto-Zionist messages are implanted, and then you go even further. Then you take the Israel trips, which are really structured in a very sophisticated way. The birthright trips that are free trips for Jewish American youth now will give them some kind of social justice experience, or they'll cater to, skaters or gamers or whoever.
Or maybe they could bring him to some protest about the fact that you can't afford any housing in Tel Aviv or something like that.
Yeah, and they did that when there in 2011, when there were social justice protests that were like intra-Jewish inside Israel. The birthright trips were kind of like, yeah, see, there's this debate in Israel. It's a democracy. Isn't that beautiful? So they do that, but the religious point of view that dominates the future base of international Israel support lends itself to fascism, because
Christian fascism, especially.
Well, yeah, but also Zionist fashion, Christian.
Right.
And once you adopt that point of view, the sheer humanity of Palestinians is off the table, and you can compartmentalize then whenever Israel is carpet bombing the Gaza Strip and liquidating entire families in multi-level homes. It's off the table. It kind of reminds me also of, when I was in Honduras a year ago, and I asked like a Honduran leftist about how all of these guys come from the slums to join the Honduran military and participate in all of these repressive operations, and assassinations as well of activists.
Right.
And he said, they learn first, they get first into evangelical Christianity, and they learn there that communists are satanic. And then they're told that we're all communists, all of us protesting for justice and against this like narco regime that's running the country. And so they don't even see us as humans. They see exterminating us as a kind of religious duty. And by the way, the Honduran government is one of the most pro-Israel in Latin America, because that's how they get, the aid from the U.S. And they showed up at the coronation of the breaking ground of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. So it's just one fascistic mentality that's gone international, and at the center of it is support for Israel.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things real quick, and I just got to hit on this. I think I meant to earlier, and it's that, Edward Mosberg again, and like he made a comment on Huckabee's show, and again, just to build on what Max said about the relationship with Christian Zionism and Zionism in general, that it's going to be more in that Trinity Broadcasting Network type. I mean, we look at those clips, and they seem crazy and whatnot, and we think those are it's kind of fringe, but I mean, you look at middle America, and you look at like the way people are feeling, people that feel totally like they've been promised something, that the post-World War II sort of American dream is like, it's been in decline, but it's like in this COVID context now, and now post George Floyd, it's like, I mean, someone in my neighborhood recently just kind of casually talking, just tell me basically that he just thought America wasn't a country for the whites anymore, and in a sad, somber tone. And this is a guy living in one of the most diverse cities in the U.S., maybe the most, in Jersey City. And it just struck me. It's like like as if he felt like he was emasculated or something by making this admission. And it's like, and I wanted to push, but it's like this guy is just like, I hate to say lost cause, but I mean, the reality is somebody like that is reflecting the way that these monuments coming down to the Confederacy, even if they're from the North or whatever. And it's like for them and things being knocked down, and them seeing this stuff on Fox News about Chaz. And I was at this protest in New York City by City Hall, and it's like an autonomous zone type thing there. And they're seeing these things happen. And it's like their little perfect white picket fence America that it's never really been that like reality, but that they've maybe had elements of and had this belief that things were always getting better is not, they're having that realization. So now they're looking into more and more bizarre sort of religious sects that get into like looking for new answers. And that's going to be, I think, the troubling trend as we see going forward. But Max, you brought up Honduras. I really would urge people on the left to really educate themselves on this, because whenever you get people are coming at you about, Venezuela or Nicaragua or Cuba or international solidarity for anti-imperialist countries or Palestine, point out Honduras, a country that in 2009, they just like coup d'etat Manuel Zelaya, the democratically elected president, put in a narco dictator, Juan Orlando Hernandez. These people are all on Twitter, just like posting Trump memes and stuff every day, and bizarre Christian, fascist type language. Their response to COVID is very much just like following whatever Trump says and implementing it. They don't have a public health system. Like people are fleeing the country because it's like there's no real economy outside of I guess tourism and the government and whatnot. And it's just an utter disaster. So much so that people are willing to risk their lives fleeing through Mexico and trying to have coyotes take them across the border and whatnot. And yet we hear nothing about this in the U.S. media. We don't hear anything whatsoever. So if Deshaun Jackson would have come out and made some comment about, supporting Juan Orlando Hernandez, he would have faced next to no criticism, nothing. And this is a guy that even the right-wing Organization of American States, right, said 2017, we're like high election irregularities, but nothing happened. And it's just business as usual, American military bases all over the country. And that, to me, Honduras is just a perfect example of the hypocrisy and just the utter bankruptcy of even the Jacobin left type people in Brooklyn that want to constantly be critical of Venezuela, point out just all these nuanced academic stuff about, calling people tankies and whatnot, labeling the Grayzone part of some red-brown alliance. It's just what do they say to that? It's so explicit. It's so unconscionable. And then the contradictions within it, they have what's even, if you really want to have your mind blown, that a lot of the landowners and the business class there are actually Palestinians that were dispossessed by Zionists that now have gone to Honduras, I guess. And Max, you know more about this than me, and then own land. And then Honduran workers have this resentment towards these Palestinian oppressors that are now, I guess they're Zionists too. I mean, what? It's just, it's so mind blowing. It's hard to even make sense of. But
it's funny, the Jewish and Palestinian business class in Honduras gets along really well.
Yeah, a lot of shared interests.
Everybody else kind of dislikes them, at least the majority of the country. But yeah, I mean, it's another example of going along with the Washington consensus and the price you pay for it. Whereas, and right now, I mean, this is completely off topic, but you mentioned COVID, all the Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, they're under a harsh lockdown that we couldn't even imagine in the U.S. People are are technically forbidden from leaving their homes, and you're living hand to mouth, day to day there in a country where there really is no economy. You're going to die at home. And at the same time, the IMF is just pumping in aid money, which makes their countries more strapped to or connected to the United States. And so it's we'll do whatever you want to get the aid money, and then we'll cut whatever social programs. And so it's sort of this self-reinforcing destruction of public health and public it's of a state structure, right, or social programs that sets people up for another crisis if there is an epidemic, or Hurricane Mitch devastated Honduras. And so, I mean, we can talk all day about that. I kind of gotta jump off here, but I think that the moment we're in right now is playing out through sports as a microcosm. And I think that's why your show is so important. And it's also important to watch out for all of the mechanisms that are going to be employed to co-opt the real organic mobilization that's going to take place within locker rooms and on the field.
Absolutely. And I know you got to go, and just to close it out, it's just, you mentioned the NBA, right? And they're coming back, and just these, the whole patches on stuff, the NFL, my cause, my cleats. The NBA likes to portray themselves as the owners and players are more like partners, to act as if that's a contrast to the oppressive NFL situation. I would argue that they're both, it's not really that big of a distinction. But nonetheless, just like Max said, it's that it's a critical battleground. This COVID context now has changed the game. We're seeing college football may be completely off the table. Ivy League's already canceled. Big Ten is conference only, and we're only where we are now here in July. But the world's different, and sports are a microcosm. And they're, especially with their absence now, in a way that's never happened before across the board. We've had strikes, lockouts, but their total absence. We're starting to see, because of that, people realizing what not having that escape is like in their life. And it's causing people to kind of have to confront reality a little bit more. And with that, the players themselves too are having to do that. And I think that despite the horrible examples of the guys that are co-opted, and we saw during this show tonight, guys like Michael Bennett, guys hopefully Kaepernick still, Kenny Stills, who, it's paid a price, taking a knee, Eric Reed, there's so many others to go down the list of guys that aren't like that. Justin Jackson, Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, honestly, he's become kind of a hero of mine here in recent months, just in the sense of just seeing an athlete who took a role. I don't know if he was on the Northwestern team yet when they were developing the union, the College Athletes Players Association the first time, but a guy who, I think he's maybe able to get away with it because he's a special teams kind of guy, running back, backup. He's not like a quarterback face of a franchise, but who knows? Maybe they might try to shut him up next. But if the NFL does play, they might be unleashing their own Frankenstein monster in the form of players that are going to not have as many second thoughts in this kind of context in the changing world we're in, about taking a knee and maybe doing even more radical forms of activism. So while there's despair and absurdity that we saw in this kind of stuff with Israel and the propaganda, there's hope too. And we just got to, keep fighting. And so I appreciate you coming on, Max, and we appreciate Mike, especially, who had to go on another, activist call, but he, providing some great context on oppressed nationality questions and so much else. So
we can follow all our work at thegrayzone.com, and I'm Max Blumenthal on Twitter. Thanks a lot for having me.
All right. Appreciate it. Keep fighting. And until next time, we'll see you then.